Hello, team players. So, we got another new ancestry to talk about, and it's the Brennari. Not only are these guys cute, but just having one of these guys in your party means everyone is better at charisma-based checks, especially diplomacy and intimidation. These guys are medium with a speed of 25 feet and a swim speed of 20 feet. They're basically space otters. So of course they have a swim speed. For attribute boosts, they get a boost of that sweet, sweet charisma, as well as constitution, and a free boost. Their ability flaw is in strength, so they're not the best in melee combat. However, Starfinder is mostly ranged combat anyway, so this doesn't really matter all that much. These guys also do get dark vision, and the empathetic whiskers ability. Unfortunately, they take a circumstance penalty to will saves against emotion effects. And whenever they end their turn adjacent to an ally with the frightened condition, they must make a DC 5 flat check. On a failure, they also become frightened 1. Not the best ability, it is kind of a debuff just straight up, but I mean, every race has some kind of weakness. Anyway, you also get the breath control general feat, meaning you can hold your breath underwater for longer. Very, very good. Now we can start talking about heritages, starting with the Ambassador Brannari. You become trained in diplomacy, and of course, if you're trained in diplomacy already, you instead become trained in something else. You can also choose one non-minion willing ally to be your ambassador partner by spending 1 minute of downtime training. You can only have one of these at a time. You and your ambassador partner gain the Pardon Me reaction. Once per day, when your ambassador partner fails, but doesn't critically fail a diplomacy check to make an impression, you attempt a diplomacy check to make an impression. Your ambassador partner uses your result for the diplomacy check instead, but it must use that result even if it's lower. This one can be fantastic. I mean, just having 2 chances at making an impression is big. The chances of you both failing are pretty low. This means that you can make an impression on almost anyone. It's a fantastic heritage, especially for outside of combat. Next we have the bioluminescent Brannari. These guys can make their fur glow and shed bright light in a 20-foot radius and dim light for the next 20 feet. In addition, you are not off guard in the water, and you don't take the usual penalties on your attacks made underwater or against an underwater enemy. Meaning, you can very easily fight underwater. You still can't use weapons that deal fire damage underwater, but you can still shoot bullets and stuff. It's fantastic if you're in water a lot. And having a light spell all the time is huge. This isn't even a once per day thing. You just have to use an interact action. That's it. Another fantastic heritage. The Clawed Brennari means you're trained in athletics. And of course, if you're already trained in athletics, you get something else. You also gain a bonus on athletics checks to force open. And you gain the ancestral unarmed attack feat for the claw attack, giving you a claw attack. This claw attack deals 1d6 slashing damage and has the agile and finesse traits, as well as it's in the brawling weapon group. In Starfinder, this one's okay. It's not great. This is pretty good for if you need a strength person to force open stuff and get to places you normally wouldn't be able to get to. And if you get stuck in melee combat, you do have a claw attack you can use. But it really depends on what you're playing, if you want to take this heritage or not. Next we have the Jungle Brenneri. With this, you also become trained in athletics. And of course, if you're already trained in athletics, you get something else. But unlike the Clawed Brennari, with this one you get a climb speed of 20 feet, which is actually worth it. This allows you to go to places that you normally wouldn't be able to during combat and still shoot your stuff. Forcing open stuff is really more for out of combat, but climbing can be especially helpful in combat, because you can get to places higher up and maybe attack things you normally wouldn't be able to. So if you want to be trained in athletics, this is the one you want to take, not the Clawed. Then we have the Pod Brennari. You have a pod that consists of a number of willing allies equal to your level. selected when you make your daily preparations. As long as you're within 100 feet of any member of your pod, you're aware if they are confused, controlled, frightened, or otherwise under the effects of an effect with the emotion or mental traits. But you receive no information beyond the presence or absence of an effect. You also gain the empathetic assistant action. For one action, if you are adjacent to a willing member of your pod who is currently frightened or affected by a harmful effect with the emotion or mental trait, you can hold the pod member's hands to comfort them. If they're frightened, reduce their frightened condition by 1. If they're under the effects of an ongoing emotion or mental effect, you can attempt to counteract it using half your level rounded up as your counteract rank and your perception modifier as the counteract modifier. On a success, you gain the effect for its reigning duration, and that pod member becomes immune to this for 1 hour. This is insane for oracles. I mean, oracles are already taking penalties, but this can be really good. Taking effects off an ally and putting them on you is actually a really good way to help your team. If you're playing something like an oracle or a mystic, this is fantastic. And then we have the Reef Brennari. You are small instead of medium. You also gain the Big Wet Eye Blink reaction. Once per day, if a creature you're aware of critically succeeds on a strike against you and would damage you, you can use a reaction to make the attacking creature take a penalty to the damage of the triggering strike equal to your level plus 2. However, this penalty applies after doubling the damage for a critical hit. But then the target is immune to this ability for a full day. Taking a little damage off of a critical hit is actually pretty good, especially if you're playing something like a soldier, and especially on an ancestry that gets a boost of constitution. If you're wanting to be in melee combat, I highly recommend this heritage. Now let's talk about first level feats, starting with Armpit Pockets. You can store up to 4 objects of negligible or light bulk in your pockets. These are protected from environmental damage, including water. You can store or remove an object with an interact action, or drop all stored objects on the ground as a free action. However, when you become unconscious, all stored items are dropped. This can be insane for something like an alchemist, or really any class that wants to craft consumable items. Just store them in your pockets. A fantastic feat here. Next we have Community Raft. This requires a swim speed. You can lock arms with 1 or more adjacent allies and an axe action. Any number of additional allies equal to half your level can lock arms with another ally in the raft as an interact action. As an exploration activity, you can swim at half your typical swim speed and carry your allies with you. If you're using the Community Raft at the start of an encounter, you and your interlocked allies can usually roll athletics instead of perception to determine your initiative. Any member of the raft can stop locking arms at any time without spending an action. And allies can still use the interlocked arms for other purposes, such as using weapons or unarmed strikes, while using this feat. In addition, you can form this raft in 0G. All members of the raft lose the untethered condition if at least one member does not have it. If the raft is moved, every member of the raft moves at the same time. If every member of the raft is untethered, the entire raft floats at the end of each round rather than the end of each member's turn. Basically, this essentially allows you to stay together, and staying together in a 0G environment can be very effective for teamwork. It can be very difficult to stay together in a 0G environment or in water. So having a feat like this can be really good. Next is Empathetic Twitch. You gain a bonus to perception checks to sense motive for targets within 30 feet of you that are not immune to emotion or mental effects. Again, another fantastic out-of-combat feat. A bonus to sense motive is big for any ambassador. They have to not be immune to emotion or mental effects, which means you can't use this on a robot, but why would you ever want to use this on a robot anyway? I mean, you want to sense motive on the robot's controller, not the robot. Anyway, let's move on to Hold Hands. For one action, if you are adjacent to an ally, you can hold hands with that ally. which occupies one each of your hands. For one round, while you remain adjacent to that ally and holding hands, you gain a bonus to your AC. In addition, you and your ally gain a bonus to your saving throws against attempts to demoralize, reposition, shove, or trip either of you. Another fantastic way to help with teamwork. I mean, this is just great defense. If you're right next to an ally, go ahead and do this. Especially if you're both using a one-handed weapon. That is fantastic. Next we have Nictitating Membrane. If you're blind or dazzled with a duration of 1 minute or less, you can use an action, and if you're dazzled due to an effect other than this feat, you can reduce the flat check to target a creature with concealment caused by your dazzle condition from 5 to 3 until the end of your next turn. If you are blinded, attempt a DC 10 flat check. On a success, you remove the blinding condition and gain the dazzle condition instead for the same duration. You cannot use this to remove a permanent blinded condition. Essentially, this is just a fantastic way of helping you hit if you happen to be blinded or dazzled. It's not that great for teamwork because it's only you that are affected by this. But when combined with other feats, this can be really good. And just with any regular attack, honestly. Personal Trinket allows you to have a object that comforts you, such as a rock, a stuffed animal, or another trinket. While you hold this trinket, you gain a bonus on saving throws and the will DCs against fear effects. If it's ever lost or destroyed, you gain another one by spending 1 week of downtime searching for a replacement. You also gain the self-soothe action. Once per round, if you're holding your personal trinket, you can grasp it tightly and reduce your frightened condition by 1. This takes 1 action. This can be very good. Remember, you can get frightened yourself if you're near anybody else that is frightened. So, being able to spend an action to get rid of that is really fantastic. And frightened is one of the most debilitating conditions in the game. I highly recommend this feat, especially since it leads to some pretty awesome feats later on as well. And finally, for level 1, we have Take Me Seriously. As a reaction, if you fail an attempt to demoralize a creature, that creature loses its temporary immunity to your demoralized attempts until the end of your next turn. But its attitude towards you decreases by 1 step. But the creature then becomes immune to this feat for 24 hours. In other words, if you fail a demoralized check, you can just do it again, which is fantastic. This is another one I highly recommend considering. This is something that I wish was in Pathfinder. Being able to attempt to demoralize twice is insane. At level 5, we're going to start with Consult the Files. As a reaction, whenever you attempt a diplomacy check, you can also attempt a recall knowledge check about the target of your triggering check. If you succeed on the recall knowledge check, you gain a bonus on the triggering diplomacy check. This is a fantastic one for out of combat. And even in combat, if you have something like Bon Mots, it's any diplomacy check. So not only do you get a recall knowledge on top of the effects of your diplomacy check, but if you succeed at the recall knowledge, you even get a bonus on the diplomacy check, which is unbelievable. I'm really surprised this is level 5. It's insane. Highly recommend this one. Next we have Medicinal Trinket, which requires the Personal Trinket feat. You've found another trinket of light bulk that can serve as a tool for medical uses, and you can conceal an object of negligible bulk inside of it. You can also use your medicinal trinket as a medikit for when you treat wounds. The first time each day you use this trinket to use battle medicine or treat wounds on yourself, you gain temporary hit points equal to your level that lasts for 1 hour. This happens regardless of the result of the attempt. Another pretty great one. I mean, granted, you only get the extra temporary hit points if you heal yourself. However, this does mean you don't need a med kit, which essentially means you can heal people with this rather than having to spend gold on a med kit. And you can conceal an object of negligible bulk inside of it, which can be anything. Doesn't have to be medical stuff. Another fantastic feat, especially for something like a mystic. Next we have Slip Through. If you become grabbed, immobilized, or restrained, as a reaction, you can attempt to escape. That's it, but it's very simple, but it's very effective. Just get out of being grabbed, immobilized, or restrained as a reaction. And you're not going to take a penalty because it's not on your turn. Another fantastic one, especially if you're something like a spellcaster. Moving on, we have Soft Paw, Sharp Claw. As a reaction, if an ally attempts a diplomacy or an intimidation check to coerce or make an impression, if the triggering check is a diplomacy check, you attempt an intimidation check, or vice versa. The ally uses the higher of the two results for the triggering check. Another fantastic one for out of combat. You can help an ally make a diplomacy or intimidation check to get them to do something for you. I mean, yes, you do have to be good at both diplomacy and intimidation to use this effectively, but otherwise, it's fantastic. I highly recommend this one if you're wanting to be an ambassador. Next is Star Swimmer. You are not clumsy or off guard in zero-G environments. In addition, when you move in a zero-G environment, you can use your swim speed as though it were fly speed, and you had the cosmic traits. While this doesn't let you breathe in space, what it does do is allow you to move at full speed with your swim speed, in the case of this feat, while in zero-G environments. If you're running into zero-G environments a lot, this is pretty much a must-take. Otherwise, you probably want to take something else. And with universal translation, you need the Ambassador Brenneri Heritage. You can attempt deception, diplomacy, or intimidation checks with the linguistic trait that target a creature that does not share your language with you, but you take a -4 penalty on the check. And furthermore, you can translate for your ambassador party when they attempt any of these checks with the linguistic trait as a reaction with the auditory trait. In other words, both you and your ambassador partner can use any of those on any creature. Granted, you are going to take a -4 penalty on the check, but using charisma-based skills on any creature is actually insane. That means you can demoralize any creature. You can use bon mot on any creature. You can lie to any creature. You can make an impression on any creature. This is ridiculous. If you're an Ambassador Brenneri Heritage, I definitely recommend this one. At level 9, we have Steady Trinket, which requires personal trinket. Once per day for one action, by holding your personal trinket, you can suppress the sickened condition for 10 minutes. This is another fantastic one. Just being able to suppress the sickened condition for 10 minutes is nuts. I mean, granted, the sickened condition isn't that common, but when you have it, it's very bad. So just being able to say, you know what? Nope, I'm not sickened for a while. Yeah. This is fantastic. And then we have Well-Loved Trinket, which also requires personal trinket and is also once per day. When you use the self-soothe action, you can also reduce your doomed value by 1. You can't use this to reduce a permanent doomed value. This one isn't near as good. I mean, it's true that doomed can be very bad, but you're hardly ever gonna run into the doomed condition. You won't use this much at all. But if I'm wrong and you're running into it a lot, take this. Absolutely. Now let's talk about 13th level feats, starting with Alarming Scream. For 2 actions, all enemies within 60 feet must attempt a will saving throw. Targets can either become Frightened 1 up to Frightened 4, and deafened for anywhere from 1 round to 1 minute, depending on how they do on their saving throw. This is fantastic. Frightening opponents and deafening them is big. I mean, granted, this isn't going to work on robots or undead, but, I mean, Frightened 4 on a critical failure is nuts. And even Frightened 2 on just a regular failure is pretty darn good. And even if they succeed, that's Frightened 1. Just lower everything. Really solid. And remember, it's all enemies within 60 feet. That means your allies are not going to be affected by this. And 60 feet is a huge area. I highly recommend this one, especially if you're a class that has high class or spell DC. Then we have Empathetic Pulse. You can cast Vibe Check 4 times per day as a second-rate innate spell, selecting a different emotion each time. You can also cast it as a 4th rank spell using 2 daily uses of the spell. but you can only project a single emotion when you cast it in this way. With Vibe Check, the target must make a will save. They can either spend its first action attacking the nearest creature, even if it's an ally. You can make them not take any hostile actions for the turn. You can make them frightened 2, or you can make them slowed 1. But if you pick the first 2, then the spell has the incapacitation trait, meaning it doesn't work well on bosses. But even if you can't use the first 2 on it, the second 2 are very good. And if you cast it at 4th rank, it affects all creatures in a 20-foot burst. Unfortunately, this can include your allies. But if your allies aren't around, all of these are very good. I highly recommend this feat as well. It is only once per day, but hey, you gotta be careful with this anyway, so there's that. And then we have Invigorating Trinket, which again requires personal trinkets, and it's again once per day. You can use an action to use your personal trinket to become quickened for 1 minute, and can use the extra action to strike or stride. Another fantastic one. Just being quickened for 1 minute is huge, and you can do it once per day for 1 action. Taking that personal trinket leads to a whole bunch of cool feats. And we've got 2 feats for level 17. Starting with Personal Sacrifice. Requires personal trinket, again, and it's once per day. When you're about to attempt a skill check, attack roll, or saving throw, you can sacrifice your personal trinket to not roll the triggering check, but earn a critical success instead. Just get a critical success, period. It is once per day, and you do lose your personal trinket for doing this, but that's still insane. Got a pretty difficult check coming up? Just sacrifice your personal trinket. It's a critical success. No matter what. No matter how high the check is. That's insane. Another great one. And then we have Synergistic Assistance. You spend 1 to 3 actions, depending on how long it takes, to aid someone. You gain an extra reaction at the start of each of your turns that can only be used to aid. This is fantastic. Aid is such an undervalued reaction. And just getting an extra reaction to do it is nuts. This is another one that I definitely recommend. It's going to be hard to choose at level 17. In fact, it's going to be hard to choose any feats for this ancestry. It really depends on what you want to do, but there's only a couple that I don't consider all that great. The rest of them are fantastic. I highly recommend this ancestry. If you guys enjoyed this video, you may like these other ancestry videos I've done for Starfinder. And of course, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really helps me out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, teamwork is vital. It helps us solve problems.